I'm absolutely convinced that we're going to grow the House majority and keep the majority in the Senate, the House, and allow President Trump 4 years and not just 2, because if we lose the majority, they'll try to impeach him and stop everything.
So that is Mike Johnson, I guess, trying to project some confidence or something, but I don't read actual confidence in him. And I know that while he's like an awful guy and he's a weak guy and he's surrendered to Donald Trump, he's handed up all of his power, he can like read a poll, let alone a mountain of polls. He knows that this isn't going well for him. Even their redistricting plot to maintain control hasn't been really working. And so he knows that there's a very good chance that he's not gonna be the speaker in just a little bit. I don't think that he's so much worried about Donald Trump. He's worried about himself, his actual power, the little bit that he has kept hold of for himself. And he should be worried because every day, seemingly, there's some big new poll or important person on the right admitting that things are not looking good for them as we cruise towards the midterms. And Karl Rove, I think, is a great example of this. He is certainly no Democrat, he's no leftist, he's not even a centrist. He's an old school Republican, and yet even he's kind of worried about what he's seeing. Take a look.
How frayed is this unity on the Republican side, and what's causing it?
Well, what's causing it is they're scared to death of the midterm elections. So you cannot run in a midterm election by saying, vote for us because we've done a great job, particularly when people don't feel the consequences of the policies that you've enacted. If the president's big beautiful bill was as instantaneously positive as he thinks, his numbers wouldn't be on approval numbers on the economy wouldn't be in the 30s, and his overall approval wouldn't be in the low 40s. So Republicans are concerned, and they need to have an agenda going into the 2026 midterms, and they don't have a forward-looking agenda at this moment.
So that is Karl Rove being one of the Republicans who's going to make the rounds and say the sorts of things that he's saying probably so that he will be brought around to do the rounds, but admitting the difficulty that the Republicans are facing. Now, let's also briefly acknowledge, in the style of JR yesterday when we were talking about that Indiana guy, he's also lying a ton there. He's like, big beautiful bill, it doesn't have the instantaneous effect that Trump no, that's not the problem with the big beautiful bill. Is not that it's not instantaneously gonna help regular people, it's that it's never going to help regular people, and you jackasses know that it's not gonna help people because it's not designed to help people. So he's still fundamentally lying about 99% of the substance of all of this. But he doesn't have to run on that bill, so he can at least admit that it's probably not gonna be that popular. And so that's like the key piece of their agenda. I don't know what their agenda that they're running on for the midterms is supposed to be. He doesn't really seem to understand it either. That's not good for the Republicans either. All of this is pretty bad, but he does have a little bit more bad news for the Republicans, and it has to do more with Trump. Take a look.
If you talk to individual members, they get that they've got a problem. They get that they need to have an agenda. They're a little bit cowed by the White House. They would prefer that it not be dictated to them by the White House. But on the other hand, the White House seems to have a sense of everything needs to come from the West Wing. If the Republicans want to maximize their victories in 2026, they need to go back in the Wayback Machine to 1992 and remember the immortal words of that great strategist, James Carville. It's the economy, stupid, he said, and you gotta have an agenda that is forward-looking. What are we gonna have in the way of pro-growth policies that Americans will say, yeah, that'll make my family and my community and my financial prospects better. And don't forget healthcare, Carville famously said. The Republicans have got to have a healthcare agenda, otherwise they're gonna be in deep trouble.
As a person who really appreciates a good whiteboard, I don't like him kind of ruining that for me. Those are barely 3 topics of discussion. It could have been on a Post-it, dude. You didn't need to have your visual. But look, I agree with the points, even if not the way that he delivers them. Yeah, they should be focusing on the economy. But again, fundamentally, this is, I'm going to say an honest thing to hide a big lie, which is that, that they want to help most people, that they were put in power to help most people, that donors propelled these campaigns to help most people. They didn't. The Republicans came in this year and did what they were actually sent to DC to do. They succeeded in their mission. They wrecked government, which they don't care about. They don't want it to function. They want to turn people against it. And they certainly want to make it as cheap as possible because that can justify more tax cuts, which they did. Massive trillions of dollars of tax cuts. It isn't just that they have, the thing they didn't do. It's the things that they did do that's the problem. But Karl Rove can't be honest about that because he loves that. And that is the big thing that MAGA has entirely in common with the sort of Republicans that always ran before MAGA took over. That's the thing. I know that we're in this MAGA period. We're like 10 years into it. We're all wondering if we're ever going to get out of it. And there are certainly a lot of things that are different about the MAGA Republican Party compared to the party that came before it. But substantively, economically, I don't know how different. There are more tariffs, I suppose. That's more aggressive. And Karl Rove did have as point number 3 in his little whiteboard, calling that out. But in terms of what they actually come in to do, they're doing the same thing they've always done. They did it under Reagan, they did it under George W. Bush, they did it under Trump the first time, and what do you know? They did it again. The one thing I do want to disagree with him on is he said that all of these Republicans who should be like looking out for themselves are being cowed by the White House, and that's not true. The White House does not contain a cow, it contains a piggy. Never forget it. But there are other polls that show just how right Karl Rove is. Here's a YouGov poll asking people their opinion of Donald Trump. Over the past year, has your opinion of him improved a lot? Basically, nobody says that. Improved a little, even less. Stayed the same. 1 out of 4 people say it stayed the same, which by the way, does not mean that it began as a positive opinion. Just remember that. But worsened a lot is at 36%. And that's pretty amazing, not just because it's a big number and bigger than any of the other categories on that poll, but but it's amazing because like how much room was there for you to lose respect for Donald Trump? This doesn't this have to be Republicans? Like if you're like a libby-lib or whatever, if you're a progressive, you were already capped out on having no respect or expectations for this jackass. And so that has to be independents and Republicans. Not good news for Donald Trump, especially going in to midterm elections. And then sort of zooming out as a president, how do you think Donald Trump will go down in history? 40% are saying poor. And then there's another 8% that say below average. That's not quite the majority.
You know what TYT has always been about? Taking on the corrupt, greedy establishment. For us, it's the corporate media. We've been fighting that fight for over 20 years. For the cell phone industry, it's the same story. A handful of massive corporations ripping you off. That's why we're partnering with Noble Mobile. They're the only wireless company with the same mission as ours, to fight back. Their Noble plan offers unlimited data for just $50 a month. But here's the best part. For any data that you don't use, you get cash back. Real money you can spend however you want. Stop letting your unused data pad the pockets of billionaires. With Noble, you take control over your data. And by switching to Noble, you're directly supporting TYT in our mission of bringing you honest, independent news. So give Noble a try and make the switch today. Scan the QR code on the screen now or visit go.tyt.com/plan. That's go.tyt.com/plan.
But hell, you can get into the White House without actually getting a majority of the vote, so I'm not gonna dock them for that. 18% say outstanding. My God, what is wrong with you people? I mean, it's basically nobody. That's actually good news that it's only at 18%, but dear God, some people have no expectations whatsoever. And anyway, this is what people think of Donald Trump during the period of his second term where he has power. Now, he's always going to have some power. He's arguably going to have more power than most presidents because he's both by defying the norms and also probably the law and the Constitution, stolen it for himself, and the Republicans in Congress have handed it up to him. But they're not soon probably gonna have that power even to hand over to Donald Trump because it looks like they're probably gonna lose control of the House. And if Donald Trump is not already a lame duck, which I have made the case I think that he is, he very much soon will be. In fact, there might be another step all along that path today in that Tennessee special election. And so things are not going good for Donald Trump during the period in which he at least has some power to theoretically change course. Soon, he won't even have that.